Well, hello and Merry Christmas, Treepl people. There's certainly a lot of good little Christmas presents to unwrap in this release, so we'll dive right in. Firstly, there's some improvements to the Bambora payment gateway. So just some options there if you're using that one under payments. If you're choosing the Bambora, you'll now see some different options on how the payment fields display, whether it's a redirect to the hosted page, I assume, or a modal like pop-up, or whether they're in line within the form. So got a few good options there for that gateway. You can change the language support as well for that, and whether to show the success page or not. So I believe previously it would take you to a confirmation page after payment on the Bambora hosted side of things, but now you can have that redirect back to the Treepl site. And just at the bottom here, there's a added note here about adding the transaction ID to the list view of the orders. So when you're looking at CRM orders, there's a transaction ID column. So I assume that's relevant to all orders, not just the Bambora gateway. So obviously there's going to be a transaction ID for any sort of payment transaction for any gateway, so that's now in the orders table as well. And just while we're here, there's been some improvements on the orders listing here so the pagination is working a little bit better there, making this page load a bit quicker. Okay, and then for those using direct billing from the on the partner portal side of things, you can now add the billing address and personal information so that appears on the invoice that they receive, that your customer receives. And it seems there might have been an issue with where the invoice was being sent, so now that's corrected and being sent to the payer or your client rather than the agency user. And for the system error pages, 404, 403, 401, they just had the correct page header or page codes updated, so that they were just reporting the right error code to the browser. But they should still function as normal. And then there's another part to the just general admin typo changes or just little tiny edits. So there's a whole bunch of things. You can go through that if you need to, but just tidying up the admin wording in bits and pieces. This one's a nice little present, custom client notes in custom field. So if you're creating a custom module, I think I did a test on services one, but we'll go into the properties of a custom module. Let's say we want to edit this one. There's now a notes field here, so you can just put some notes against this field, so what it's for, what type of input is to be expected in that field, so that the admins have a little bit better understanding on what the field's used for, or what to put in there. So the example they give here is if it's an image field, you can describe what size image is to be expected there, maybe what file format, and whatnot. So we could just add some notes here, like image 500 pixels, save that against this title field. That's not a relevant note, but just for this example. And then when we go to a item within that custom module and come down to that title field, you can see there's now this little icon here, little notes icon, and when you hover over that, you get a little toolbox or tooltip there that presents the note that you entered in. So particularly useful for image fields, but yeah, certainly a lot of use cases for that one. And the final little note at the bottom here is that that's also included in the module import-export capabilities as well. So if you're on a plan that supports the module exporting. So when you're in settings for a particular module, you can export that whole module. So that will include the notes that you've added in as well. Okay, and while we're on this settings page for a custom module, the next item here is the ability to set a custom icon for the items that you might list in a custom module when it's in a tree view structure. So when you have grouped custom modules. So we can see I've set one up here. So under the settings for your custom module, there's a new field here called icon. And how this actually works is there's sort of a admin assets for these icons. So if you click the little icon manager here, there is a systems tab, so you can choose from the existing icons within the system, or you can upload your own custom icon, and that will go into the system assets folder to be used within this admin. So I've just uploaded this YouTube icon here, SVG. I believe you can upload PNGs as well, maybe some other formats, but obviously SVG is ideal for icon usage, so I've uploaded that, and we've saved that against this custom module. So you can see here the services module and the portfolio module I have in a grouped situation, so like a nested custom module. So when we're on the list view and we place it into tree view mode, which is probably how you would display a grouped custom module setup, you can see now that the icons have changed for those items that are in that services module. Okay, so just kind of helps you further customize and define what this module is about and how it works. And I just did do a quick test when you secure an item. So normally you'll get this like padlock on a regular item. When it's a folder that's secured, you get this folder icon. So that currently does override the icon that you have put. So just if the Treepl team's listening, maybe some feedback there is that the secure icon moves to like the icons that are listed here rather than overriding the item icon. So same here. When the item's disabled, you might have that eye or the little calendar when it's out of expiry date or something like that. So maybe the secure icon could be added to the side of the name rather than overriding the icon. Or maybe it could be like positioned, over the top, like to the corner of the icon. Just because now it's even more relevant because we can customize those icons. So that was just one thing I noticed, but otherwise that's pretty cool. We can now customize that even further. Okay, so the next item is for some GDPR settings. So basically the GDPR settings that were brought in for the CRM, where contacts or the expanded CRM, the custom groups, you could only output them onto the front end if the contact had ticked a box to accept that they allowed their contact details to be displayed like that. But basically now we have a setting under the settings option, miscellaneous, and GDPR settings. So basically this allows listing of CRM contacts. So essentially this will turn off those current GDPR settings essentially. So allowing you to list all those details without having to go through that step of getting the customer end user to tick that box some way or another. So that's good for people in locations where the GDPR settings don't come into effect like that, and in situations that you're developing something that doesn't sort of suit that GDPR workflow. Okay, so this applies to there's two components, the CRM contacts, so listing out the contacts in general, and then listing out the CRM custom groups, so those custom fields that you can add to the CRM. It lists another component here, the CRM contact custom group, but this is the legacy component that was replaced by this one. So these two do the same thing. It also affects the CRM data source. So if you have a custom module and you're adding a field that allows you to select a CRM record, they would also be restricted to the GDPR setting. So now this setting will allow any customer record to be displayed in that CRM picker as well. Okay, and there was another sort of extension to this, is that they're now going to include, so when you output the CRM contacts via the CRM component tag, it will also include their secure zone information. So similar to what we had with this tag here, the request current member. So if someone's logged in, you can pull out their secure zone details. But if you're listing a lot of CRM members, you can get all their secure zone details in that list as well. Okay. So then there was a bunch of little admin tweaks and changes. So we've got the site name and user added to the title bar, so you can see the user email address and the site name up here. So that's very handy, particularly when you're jumping back and forth between multiple sites. It can get pretty confusing, and which admin you're in can lead to some nasty mistakes. So having that in there is really handy. There's a notification indicator with this little bell icon here. So we'll go into that a little bit more with some further backlog items here. There's a fix to the data source search in the data source pickers. So again, when you're creating a custom module and you're adding in a data source field, it was limited to what it would display for performance reasons, and it sort of worked on a search. So when you started typing, it would search the data source items and just return those items matching the search. But it was only retrieving based on the name and the first letters as you typed it. But now it will sort of look anywhere within the name, just by containing those letters. So often was the case you didn't exactly know which item you might be searching for, but you knew sort of roughly what the name contained. So that this helps with finding those items without having to know exactly how the name started. So that was a bit of an issue. And also they're now sorted alphabetically. So again, it's easier to find those items you're looking for. Okay, now relating to tags, you can now resort the tags completely alphabetically. So if I jump to my blog, just open up. So coming down to the tags field, when you're looking at this list of tags here, you can see the tags I have here aren't in alphabetical order, but you can obviously rearrange them into whatever order you want. But for those who have quite a lot of tags that are getting a bit unruly, you can just completely resort them alphabetically, and that'll put them in a nicer format for the admins to be able to find the tags they're looking for. And obviously there's that little warning that comes up because it's not really undoable, so we don't want to accidentally do that. Okay, and there's at least some feedback now when you're doing the following tasks, like importing module items, exporting module items, duplicating a module item. So I might just show the screenshots here instead because it might make a bit more sense. So when you export, say, reports or custom modules or anything like that, you now get a pop-up just saying that background processes are running. Don't close this tab, and it will continue loading, running the task in the background. This one. And this is where we get to that notification bell icon in the top of the menu bar. While the process is running, because some of the exports can take a little bit of time, there will be this flashing icon, and when you hover over that, you'll get a little tooltip that tells you that their background process is running, just warning you not to close the tab. And the final screenshot here. So this is if you do attempt to close the tab. A bit like if you have unsaved changes, it will alert you that there are processes running, and give you that option to cancel that process of closing the tab. Okay, so that's just some feedback, because before you weren't quite sure what was happening. Often these exports would take a long time, and you just didn't know if they had finished or something was happening or wasn't happening. So at least we've got some good feedback there now. Okay, and then just in regards to another warning that pops up when you change between WYSIWYG and code view, and then go attempt to save that, you get this warning here that some data might be corrupted. And so that seems to be quite a rare situation where that will happen. So if your site is not really particularly prone to anything like that happening, you can just turn off that warning message, because it can be sort of a bit alarming to admin users, clients. So under, I believe, settings, miscellaneous, there's a new option here under the admin panel settings, so disable warning notification. So you can just turn that off altogether. Okay, and the final little task here was an improvement to the gallery sliders module. Now on my particular site I'm not seeing this one, but it may be because I've already customized the table perhaps. Sorry, under content, so galleries and sliders. So the table view here, they're saying they're removing the URL and template columns, because I guess they don't really make sense to show them for the gallery groups, because these are just the groupings, and they don't necessarily have URLs and templates that you would go to under the typical setup. So, but my admin here is obviously still showing them, so I'm not sure if that's just because I've edited that table at one stage. It's not going to override that custom setting. So, so that's the final change there. And then just another validation notification change here for an already taken URL. So if you're creating a new page or a new module item, and you're using a URL or a slug that's already been taken, basically there's two ways to handle that now. So the default current way is that upon save, if that URL has been used before, the system will just append like -1, -2, -3 onto the end of the URL to make it unique. But often in cases that's not desirable, you'd rather just be alerted to that and change the URL to something better. So under settings again, miscellaneous, you can now change that to disable the autocomplete for already taken URL slugs. So the autocomplete is the appending of the 1, 2, 3. So we can turn that off, and instead you get a live notification validation that just here, warning, duplicate URL. So you can correct that URL before going forward. Okay, and there was some changes to the pagination. So at the moment, the pagination was fairly basic, just basically spitting out an unordered list. Now there's the option to have that output as a styled and better controlled pagination. So we're going to have an additional option in, so I'll jump to somewhere where I can edit some content. Let's just say our page. I'll just jump into this one here. So let's say we're configuring a component, let's say a custom module. So a list of items. So we have, once you select display pagination, that you want to display it, you have the option now to choose whether it's going to be the new styled pagination. So you can click that on, and we can see down here we've got the new parameter styled pagination is true. So when the pagination is output for this component, it will be in the new format. And I'll just bring up that image, might be a good idea. So we'll get something looking a bit more like this. And I believe it's going to have the separation there if you've got quite a few pages. It's not just going to output all of those pages, you're going to have a sort of a divider there. Okay, so obviously you can use the toolbox here, or the component manager, to create your components, and you can also code this manually. If you're doing components manually, you can add that manually. Okay, and it just tells you here which modules this applies to, which is basically all the relevant modules, I believe. Custom modules, blogs, galleries, FAQs, banners, authors, events, and e-commerce. Okay, so then we have some more tweaks to just to how the content items look over here. So under the content menu, all these items now have the icons, as you can see here. So that was previously just little arrows, I believe. Now they all have icons. So hopefully that makes things a little easier to recognize and navigate to. Okay, and then we have just a tweak to the editing window. So basically this window here for editing page content. If you have a particularly large browser or some taller screen real estate, this window didn't always take up the full width. So to simulate that, I'm just going to zoom my browser out. So you can see now, if you have, oops, that's a bit too far. If you have a really tall screen, this editor window is going to take up that full height. Before it sort of was just to a fixed height, I believe. So yeah, it just allows you to utilize all that screen real estate for coding. Okay, and then this one I'm going to find really handy is the recent item selection. So basically, as you navigate through the admin, you're going to build up like a history of recent items, and so now you can look at the recent items list here and just quickly navigate back to somewhere. So yeah, quite often I'm finding myself going back and forwards between settings and content, or layouts and content, or something like that. So you can just, it should make that a lot easier to keep jumping back and forwards to, and hopefully will reduce the amount of tabs you have open. Yeah, it just says here that's going to remember the last 10 visited pages, and if you visit a page more than once, it just bumps that up sort of in priority in that list, so it appears at the top. Okay, so next on the list is just some improvements in the toolbox. So this is around e-commerce. So let's just open the toolbox here. When you're looking at e-commerce, there's quite a number of components that you're most likely going to add to like a product list view or detail view. And those components need to know where they're going to pull information from. And it's usually always from the product that they're being displayed with. So for example, if you want to display the related products to the product that you're looking at, there was a filter value which allowed you to select the product that you wanted to pull from, that you wanted to grab those related products from. But typically, you don't really want that. You just want to put in this ID because you want it to pull from the current product that you're looking at. So now that's kind of been made the default, just to make that more easy to edit. So the first option is this .id. So that's how it's kind of recommending that you add. So that's just kind of sort of been made the default, or the default way that you would list these out, rather than having to replace that in the code all the time, because it's hard coded a particular product's name in there. So that applies to the related products, group products, the product's attributes, and the item quantity and add to cart buttons. And I believe by reading this statement here, it sort of seems like that's going to be the default anyway. Like if you leave that out, the item ID parameter out altogether, if it's not included, that this ID will be the default. It will always just look at the product that it's currently on. Okay, the next item is to do with secure zones. So now we have basically the ability to turn off the secure zone login details email, and also the confirm email notification email. So if you've played around with secure zones before, you kind of know that there's this whole bunch of emails that go out after someone subscribes or registers to a secure zone. So they get their secure zone login details email, then they get a confirmation email to confirm their email address. If it's a paid secure zone, they'll get the invoice, and they'll also get like an autoresponder if you've got that set up on the form. So there can be quite a few emails that go out. And before, we didn't have any control over the secure zone type ones. So now we can turn both of those off. But just realize that if you turn those off, then you need to sort of achieve their purpose in a different way. So, I mean, the secure zone login details doesn't necessarily need to be presented to the user. You could just have some general wording in the autoresponder, so that's sort of fine. But the confirmation of their email address obviously needs to happen in some way or another. So now we have a liquid tag that we can use in the other emails, so that you can still satisfy that confirmation, because it still needs to happen. It's not that we can turn that off, we just can turn off the email that gets sent. So basically it's saying on the invoice layout and on the secure zone logins detail, if you haven't turned it off, you can use this .email confirmation URL to present the link to the user. And it looks like also on the invoice layout, within the liquid scope, we also will have access to their secure zone details as well. So if there's any content that you want to conditionally show, or you want to list anything about their secure zone that they've subscribed to, we can do that in there as well. So this is all just helping us get away from so many emails being sent. And it looks like we can now try and consolidate a lot of those functionalities and requirements into maybe one or two emails instead. Okay, next up, the CRM Bookings Export. So now it looks like the export for bookings is a lot. You have a lot more control over that. So under the CRM and event bookings, now when we go to export these, you can select not only what form you want to export from, so what form submissions, like group them under the form submissions that created the registration. You can now just select all forms, so you can just export all registrations, or you can export the ones that were manually added to the admin, so that didn't have a form registration associated with them at all. Or you can select just a few multiple forms that were associated with the registration. So that's pretty cool, sort of covers all angles there. And likewise for the event that you might want to export registrations for, you can either do all events again, or just select one or more events to export. So that's going to be really handy for people using the export and events module. And that brings us to the end of the admin updates, with just 2 final bug fixes as well. So hopefully now we're seeing a fix to the admin login issues that some of us were facing with just that infinite redirect loop. So hopefully there's no having to clear cookies and refresh and all that sort of stuff. Looking forward to see that one fixed now. And there was just like a bug in the Toolbox or the component manager where if you're constructing your event component tag, it wasn't putting in the right grouping tag to display those properly, but that should be working correctly now. Okay, so a lot of nice little extra features there for the admin. Okay, so thank you very much, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.